Ice-cold air. No walls, no blankets like the ones on your bed tonight. Just you, a handful of other humans, and a night that could actually kill you before sunrise. That's the question we're answering right now. What did ancient humans actually do when it was too cold to sleep? Here's the tension. For most of human history, our ancestors lived through winters that modern people would call a survival emergency. No heating systems, no synthetic insulation, just fire, skin, and each other. And yet they slept, night after night, for hundreds of thousands of years, through ice ages that dropped temperatures far below anything most of us will ever experience. So the real mystery isn't whether they survived the cold, it's how a species with no fur, no thick hide, and skin as thin as ours managed to do it, over and over, for generation after generation. And there's a twist coming later in this story that might change the way you think about your own bed tonight, because some scientists believe the way ancient humans slept wasn't a workaround for the cold. It may have shaped the way your body still expects to sleep today. Let's go back about 400,000 years to a Europe locked in the grip of an ice age. Winters here weren't just cold, they were the kind of cold that turns exposed skin numb in minutes. This is the world Neanderthals lived in, long before modern humans ever arrived on the continent. And for a long time, archaeologists assumed these early humans simply endured the cold, huddled and shivering, barely getting by. Then excavations at sites like Molodova, in modern-day Ukraine, uncovered something that didn't fit that picture. Circles of mammoth bones, arranged deliberately, with signs of hearths inside them. Not random debris structure. These weren't people passively surviving the winter. They were engineering it. Fire was the first weapon against the cold, but fire alone raises a problem. A flame needs constant feeding, and someone has to stay awake to feed it. So who kept watch while the others slept? Evidence from hearths across Europe shows repeated layers of ash and charcoal, meaning fires weren't just lit once they were maintained through the night, night after night, for years at some sites. That means something remarkable. Shift-based fire tending may be one of the earliest forms of organized nighttime cooperation in human history. Someone was always awake, so someone else could stay warm enough to close their eyes. But fire could only do so much. You needed something between your skin and that freezing air. This is where the story takes a turn, because for decades, scientists assumed Neanderthals didn't have real clothing, just loosely draped hides. Then researchers started examining stone tools more closely and found tiny, almost invisible scrape marks, the kind left by scraping fat and flesh from animal skins to prepare them for wearing. This wasn't decoration. This was tailoring, of a rough kind, long before anyone thought it existed. It gets more precise once modern humans enter this cold world around 45,000 years ago. At sites like Sungir, in Russia, archaeologists uncovered burials of humans dressed in clothing, so detailed that researchers could reconstruct it from the position of thousands of ivory beads that had clearly been sewn in rows along sleeves, trousers, and hoods. And alongside these burials, something even more telling: bone needles, some barely thicker than a modern sewing needle, dating back over 40,000 years. That's not survival gear. That's engineering built to trap body heat exactly where it escapes fastest: wrists, ankles, the neck. If you've ever noticed how quickly your hands and feet get cold before the rest of your body, you're feeling the same vulnerability your ancestors were fighting against, with nothing but bone tools and animal hide. So they had fire, they had clothing, but there was still the problem of the ground itself. Cold earth pulls heat out of a sleeping body faster than cold air does. And this is where the story gets genuinely surprising, because the solution wasn't just physical, it was social. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer groups, living in cold climates communities whose lifestyles echo in some ways our ancient past, have observed something called nested sleeping. Multiple people sleeping in close physical contact, arranged almost like a puzzle, smallest and most vulnerable bodies pushed toward the center. Adults on the outside absorbing the worst of the cold. It's not just comfort. Body heat, shared deliberately, becomes a survival tool. And this pattern shows up again and again in the archaeological record. The size and shape of ancient hearths and shelters at sites like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic suggest groups slept clustered tightly together, not spread out. Cold nights didn't just demand fire, they demanded closeness. If you're starting to feel like ancient survival was as much about people as it was about tools, you're exactly right, and that idea is worth sitting with for a second, because it's easy to imagine our ancestors as isolated and self-reliant. They weren't. They survived because they slept in a pile. Now here's where the story takes an unexpected turn into your own biology, because the human body itself carries evidence of this cold, adapted past. Scientists studying something called brown adipose tissue, or brown fat, found that this special tissue doesn't store energy the way regular fat does. It burns it directly to generate heat, almost like an internal furnace. Human infants are born with significant amounts of it. Some researchers argue this is a leftover adaptation from a species that spent enormous stretches of its evolutionary history in cold, harsh climates, needing every biological advantage it could get just to make it through the night. And it isn't just your body that may carry a memory of those nights. It might be your sleep itself. Historian Roger Ekirch spent years digging through pre-industrial records court documents, diaries, medical texts, and found repeated references to something almost nobody does today: sleeping in two distinct segments through the night, with a period of quiet wakefulness in between. People would sleep, wake for an hour or more in the middle of the night to talk, tend a fire, or simply lie still in the dark, and then fall back into a second sleep before dawn. Some researchers connect this pattern to a world without artificial light, a world where fires needed tending and darkness stretched on for far longer, uninterrupted, than it does now. If that connection holds, the way you sleep tonight, in one uninterrupted block from bedtime to alarm clock, might be the unusual pattern, not the ancient one. If any of this is making you rethink your own nightly routine, that curiosity is exactly why it's worth hitting subscribe, because the deeper history of how humans lived is stranger and closer to us than most people realize. Put all of this together, and a very different picture forms. Ancient humans facing a killing cold didn't just endure it. They built systems against it, layered clothing sewn with bone needles, hearths tended through coordinated night shifts, sleeping arrangements engineered around body heat, and quite possibly a rhythm of sleep itself shaped by long hours of darkness and firelight. None of it was guaranteed to work. Across the ice ages, plenty of groups didn't make it. The ones who did left behind more than bones. They left behind a body plan, and possibly a sleep pattern that traveled forward through hundreds of generations, arriving, eventually, in you. So tonight, when you pull a blanket up to your chin, or notice your feet are the first thing to feel cold, you're not just reacting to a chilly room. You're carrying forward a solution that took hundreds of thousands of years to build, one your ancestors developed with fire, bone needles, and the warmth of people sleeping close enough to keep each other alive. The cold nights are gone for most of us now, but something in how we still fall asleep, how our bodies still respond to a drop in temperature, remembers them. You'll probably never look at a cold night or an empty side of the bed quite the same way again.